Welcome to the Girls and Ghosts podcast. I'm Shauna.
And I'm Lexie.
And in today's episode, we are going to be discussing the Annabelle doll. We thought it'd be fun to discuss this doll because last episode we discussed the Conjuring house, and if you don't know this already, they are connected. So first off, we are going to start off with talking about the history of the Annabelle doll, and then we are going to read some experiences that people have had with the Annabelle doll. How many times do I have to say Annabelle doll? Take a shot every single time I say Annabelle doll. Ever since the Conjuring film was released, followed by the Annabelle movie in 2014, rumours have swirled about the Warren duo The Conjuring and a true story behind the Annabelle doll. Was the real Annabelle doll quite as vindictive and evil as the doll in the film? Did the Warrens really keep a doll with a demon attached to it? Although the real-life Annabelle doll was a Raggedy Ann doll, nowhere near as frightening in appearance as the proclaimed doll in the film, many of the details were frighteningly similar.
The student nurse. The real Annabelle was given to Donna, who was a student nurse, as a birthday gift by her mother. One thing to remember, Annabelle was brought second-hand from a hobby store. She was living with her friend Angie at the time, and Donna was delighted with the gift at first, but the Conjuring doll quickly became a source of great fear for the girls. Annabelle made only very small movements to begin with that could be put down to Donna or Angie accidentally moving her, for example ending up on the floor instead of on the chair. Maybe she fell off. Soon, though, the movements started to increase, and the doll started to move more. For example, she may have ended up on the couch instead of on Donna's bed, or outside Angie's door immediately after she was returned to Donna's room. Their close friend Lou was very nervous of the seemingly innocent Raggedy doll. He believed that she was evil or possessed, and that something needed to be done about it. But Donna and Annie were very progressive in their views and didn't think anything of the sort, and still believed that perhaps they were to blame for the movements of the doll.
The Annabelle doll story quickly became more sinister. Soon the girls started to find notes around their apartment. The strange thing was that the notes were written on parchment paper, and neither of the two girls had ever used parchment paper before. The notes said various things, but most commonly they said things like "help Lou" and "help us."
The blood. Finally, the doll from The Conjuring, Annabelle, was found with blood on her hands. Donna came home from work one day and found the doll in her usual spot on her bed, which made a change, but unfortunately she had literal blood on her hands. It seemed almost like the blood, or the red liquid, whatever it was coming from the doll itself. That was it. It was time for the girls to call in some help in the form of a medium, find out what was going on with this doll before things got worse.
The first medium sat down with the girls and Annabelle, scary doll, and the story that Donna and Angie was given was that the land on which their apartment complex was built used to be a field. A young girl aged around 7 years old was found dead there many years before. When the doll came into their apartment, Annabelle's spirit was still in the area in which she died, and because she was fond of the doll, her spirit became one with it. Annabelle became Annabelle the doll. Unfortunately for the girls, Annabelle became Annabelle the haunted doll. Donna and Angie was very loved and given, however, because they felt sorry for the poor girl that had been found dead alone in that field, they wanted the doll to stay because they didn't want her to be left alone.
Lou was the one who was attacked by Annabelle before the Warrens were called in. Maybe she didn't like him, or maybe he reminded her of a man who had treated her badly in life. But he was the one that she showed her true self to. A few things occurred, including some bad dreams and some visions of Annabelle, but the attack that made Donna and Angie call the Warrens was a physical one. Angie and Lou were spending some time together when they heard movement in Donna's room, but she wasn't at home. They were frozen in fear. At first they were concerned about an intruder, but they quickly realized that the movement was in fact Annabelle. Lou took a look inside Donna's room and there was no one inside, although the doll was sitting on a chair instead of on the bed where she should have been. He moved forwards towards Annabelle and a feeling crept over him. That creeping feeling you get when something is terribly, terribly wrong. He felt a terrible pain on his chest and realized that there was a series of claw marks. Raking marks like someone had leaped at him and roughly scratched him. No one was in the room, and so he knew that the marks must have come from Annabelle. What was stranger still about these scratches is that they healed straight away, and within just 2 days there was no trace of them at all. The Warrens were then called in.
The Warrens. A priest was called into the apartment along with the Warrens, and it was discovered that Annabelle's main goal was to take possession of Donna's soul. Annabelle was a demon. She was attached to the doll. The Warrens said that demons don't possess items or things, instead they possess people. The priest eventually exorcised the apartment and the Warrens took Annabelle away with them. They both agreed that it would be best to drive home on the back roads, worried that if they drove on the main highways that Annabelle would find a way to cause an accident. Sure enough, they were plagued with car problems the whole way home. The power steering failed, the brakes failed, and the engine of the car kept stalling. The problems ceased for a little while once Ed Warren sprinkled Annabelle with some holy water. Once the pair got home, Ed put the doll on his desk, thinking that she'd be safe there for a little while. Soon, she showed them what she was really made of. Annabelle was seen rising above the desk, levitating on multiple occasions. Soon, that activity slowed down and stopped, and the Warrens thought that perhaps the demon had quieted. But she was soon found in different rooms of the house, moving around, and when Warrens put her in one place, she would quickly be found in another. Ed and Lorraine called the priest, but he didn't seem to take it too seriously, and said to Annabelle that she couldn't hurt him because she was just a doll. That was a big mistake, because he was in a car accident on the way home. The car turned over, the brakes failed, and his car was completely written off. Although the priest was badly hurt, he did survive.
Annabelle is still around today, residing in the locked case that the Warrens built to keep her from getting free and roaming around their house. There is a warning sign on the case saying "Do not touch," as well as a cross. Some say that they see Annabelle moving around the case waiting to get free. Annabelle in The Conjuring wreaked havoc on those around her, and the real Annabelle doll most definitely did the same. The Conjuring doll is one of the spookiest tales in modern history when we talk about haunted objects, particularly because she had to be kept behind locked case, and particularly because the Warrens didn't manage to rid the doll of the demon. Annabelle is still available to view today. Would you dare to visit her?
So that is the history that we was able to find about Annabelle. There's probably a lot more history because, I mean, come on, the Annabelle doll has been like all places and it has had loads of different experiences.
Yeah, because didn't she recently go on a world tour?
Yeah, I don't really know anything about like what came about that. I don't know.
I don't know, because didn't the Warrens literally say do not move her?
Yeah, they also said don't let her out of the case, and that's
exactly what they did.
Yeah, so. Okay, now we are going to go into some people's stories that we've found, and their experiences with this doll. Introduction to the Annabelle doll. The event took place on October 29th, 2016 in Monroe, Connecticut, in a large Italian restaurant called Roberto's. The backside of the room was filled with antique occult objects, the shadow doll and the conjuring mirror. They are some of the most noteworthy items of the Warrens' occult room. At the center of the back was a tall, lengthy object covered with a sheet on top. Everyone knew Annabelle was underneath. Tony was a great speaker and walked through the life of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The event went perfectly at first, but the evening took a heavy turn when we started listening to a real possession tape. I can still hear the dark words from the tape as clear as day in my head. Tony hesitantly paused the tape and confessed he didn't like to play the entirety because something evil may manifest itself if you listen for too long. The dark voice on the tape was even making jokes. Tony told the room that dark entities enjoy making jokes and possessions aren't how you always see them depicted in the movies. My eyes widened in amazement. When it was time to unveil Annabelle, Tony gave a few frightening words beforehand. He warned everyone not to mock her or say anything negative and not to tease her. Everyone was silently nervous. Tony talked about a man attending one of the events that proceeded to mock Annabelle. When he left that night, he got into a serious accident on his motorcycle and was found dead. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone tells me not to do something, doing that very thing is all I can think about. One by one, people got up from their seat and took a photo with Annabelle. As I waited in line, I kept thinking, okay, just take a photo. Don't mock her. Just go quickly. Don't mock her. I kept repeating that same phrase in my head. Somehow, my mind slipped into a dark place and I mocked her. In my mind, I thought about how hideous she looked inside her box. I screamed internally to put that thought away and took my photo with her. It was surreal to be standing next to her. At this point, I was on cloud 9 at the idea of being in the same room with such an infamous object. However, it never occurred to me that I could bring something home with me, and for the next year and a half, I was stuck in a living nightmare.
Bro, why? I said something like, I would not want to mock her just because someone said don't mock her.
Oh, no, definitely. Although, I do think because someone said don't mock her, in my head, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't mock her. And then because I'm thinking so hard about not doing it, I'll accidentally do it, kind of like this person. You know when you think like so hard, don't do something, don't do it, and then you do it, like accidentally. It's just like, because you shouldn't, you do. I don't know. Anyway.
It started as a joke. As I settled in back home at my roommate's house, I had just finished eating dinner and was taking my plate downstairs. I remember stepping on the ground, but somehow it felt like I missed a step. I fell and badly twisted my ankle as my glass plate broke into pieces. My roommate thought it was comical, as I had to limp up the stairs for the next couple weeks. My next step in life was finding a place where my kitchen was on the same floor as my bedroom, hence my clumsiness. I looked through many apartments and found one I loved in Long Beach. Although a long commute from my job, I thought it was perfect. I moved in within 2 weeks of applying and was enjoying my own space. Not long after, I started noticing bugs and cockroaches in corners. I'd kill them and they'd be gone for a couple days. After a while, it got out of hand and I found them everywhere. It wasn't just one or two. It seemed like I was killing 10 roaches every time I turned around. I found them in my lotion, on my bed, in my shower, in my food, and in all my clothes. So I complained to management, and their only solution was to offer me a can of bug spray. Apparently the roaches were coming from my next door neighbour. My neighbour was an elderly woman who always wore the same long blue dress and loved to stare for uncomfortable amounts of time. Every time I'd leave my apartment, she'd open the door and stare at me. One time I asked her, "Why are you staring at me?" All she did in response was cackle. The elderly woman didn't take care of her cat, never took out her trash, and had stacks of garbage on top of stacks of garbage. Management evicted her and didn't even bother cleaning out her apartment. Within the next few days, my unit had a full-on infestation. I couldn't even put a sock on without checking to see if it had roach eggs. I was convinced something was out to get me, and my dream apartment turned into a dwelling from hell. This one's on you.
Oh, great. The Annabelle doll caused me physical pain. One night I woke up to the sharpest of pains in my stomach at 3 a.m. I couldn't stand up, bend, move, or get out of my bed. All I could do was scream in agony. I was convinced I was dying and called my mum in a panic. She drove to my apartment and took me to the ER in the middle of the foggy night. The nurse ran multiple tests, put in an IV, and stuck me in a private room as I screamed in pain. Doctors found nothing wrong with me and couldn't give me any answers. As it approached dawn, they let me go home, and for a moment they had me doubting myself and my pain. I went back to my gross apartment and filed a health complaint. There were weeks when I wouldn't even stay in my own home out of fear of sleeping in a roach-infested bed. Eventually I broke my lease and found a place with my sister. It had everything we wanted and was bug-free. Just like in horror movies, when something bad happens, the solution is to move. That's always the answer. You move and everything is supposed to be good. Until it's not. During the same time, I had the flu for 2 weeks and developed a persistent cough not long after my sickness. I went to the emergency care twice and the doctors couldn't find anything wrong. They said it was allergies and put me on a medication and an inhaler. I saw different specialists who put me on more medications and ran tests every couple of weeks. My cough grew increasingly more severe and enough people at work noticed that they reported me to HR. It was mortifying to try to talk about an illness that I couldn't even explain. 9 doctors visits and 5 specialists later, they couldn't diagnose me.
This is not a coincidence. Annabelle is out to get me. I'm not the superstitious type, but I was convinced this was more than just a string of bad luck. One restless night, as I was starting to fall asleep, I heard a faint crickling noise. It sounded like someone squishing a plastic bag. At the foot of my bed, I heard the crinkling sound over and over. I thought it was my dog, but he was sleeping on the couch. Then I heard another crinkling noise and becoming increasingly paranoid. I couldn't bring myself to look down at my feet. I clenched my blankets as it got quiet and the rustling started again. Then I sat up, turned on the light, and spent hours looking for the plastic bag. I never found it. Soon afterwards, my dog became violently ill. With my excessive coughing, hearing noises in the night, and my poor dog's sudden sickness, I was about ready to lose it. One night, he got off the bed and pooped on the carpet. Said something else for you. It was really late. I got up to clean up the mess and take him outside. As I laid back in bed, I noticed that my feet were covered in his feces. I screamed and jumped in the shower. I threw my sheets in the wash and poured a towel on my bed to use as a blanket. Then I inspected my bed as I was confused how he managed to soil my bed without me noticing. Everything looked fine after inspecting. This time I was exhausted and had work in the morning. As I laid back down, I noticed I still smell his faces everywhere. I buried my face deep into the pillow and screamed as I felt a wetness on my face. I lifted my head off the pillow, ran to the mirror, and saw my entire face was covered in his poop. I called off work the next day. I told the story to my family and friends who all laughed and tried to convince me that I probably didn't check my bed thoroughly. While it was a funny story to tell, it certainly wasn't funny to live. Over the next few months, my sanity was put to the test. I had constant creaking, I was regularly sick, I heard noises coming from inside my walls, my eyes played tricks on me in the dark. This no longer felt like a home. I started becoming suspicious. That suspicious feeling intensified when I came home from work, walked into my apartment and saw it, a cockroach on the wall.
Everything breaks down. How can one person have this much bad luck? The only thing I could think of to explain my string of misfortune was Annabelle. It had to be her. I may not have been possessed by anything, but what manifest was so much worse. The cockroach infested started all over again. I constantly cleaned my apartment and knew I had to take down some of my horror collectibles on my wall since they were probably messing with my head. At the time I had living dead dolls and Funko Pops on shelves in my bedroom. I had Funko Pops of Chucky, Tiffany, Annabelle, Pinhead and Jigsaw. There was enough going on in my life that I didn't feel like staring at this memorabilia all night. After an evening of cleaning, I woke up and one of my Funko Pops was on the floor. When I picked it up I noticed that it was Annabelle. The 6-inch box scared the living hell out of me. All of the other Funko Pops were on the shelf except Annabelle. I drove to the trash can far away from my house. I know how this works, and threw the doll away. Relief never seemed to last long, even though I thought everything was settling. After my sister and I got home from watching a movie, I put my purse down on the counter and grabbed a drink from the fridge. As I turned around and reached inside my purse, a huge cockroach crawled up my arm and made a move towards my face. The tiny legs of the cockroach crawling up my exposed skin made me scrub my arm in the shower until it turned red.
Something isn't right. One night I was wide awake and looking at the ceiling. From my back bedroom window, I saw our automatic lights go off on the outside walkway downstairs. It was really late and I was constantly observing everything out of paranoia. I thought it might be my neighbour who typically worked late. Suddenly, we heard our apartment door being rattled and shaken. Fear pierced through my body as I jumped up without hesitation, grabbed my dog and sister and threw them in the small bathroom. Someone was trying to break into our home. We cornered ourselves into the bathroom and all stood in fear. I called the police, who took over half an hour to arrive. It was the most excruciating 30 minutes since we didn't know if the intruder had left. This was the last straw. We moved out after this encounter. I hadn't slept in months. I was tired and sick. Sure, I have been through tough experiences, but never something of this magnitude within the short amount of time.
Whatever you do, don't mock the Annabelle doll. As we left that apartment, I knew I needed to turn over a new leaf. I didn't need to see anything supernatural or experience anything abnormal to know the horror I experienced wasn't a coincidence. Between all the unseemly happenings, I experienced car problems regularly, had a hard time functioning, and couldn't get ahead no matter how hard I tried. It always felt like something was enjoying watching me suffer, whether it was Annabelle or not. Every area of my life was invaded and my physical and mental health suffered. I trashed the outfit I wore the night I met her, threw out all the souvenirs from the event, tossed the purse I carried that day, and even got a new phone. Additionally, I deleted the photos from the event. Everything slowly started getting better and my life no longer felt like a twisted horror movie. I moved into a better apartment, my illness was suddenly gone, and the strange occurrences at night all stopped. I deleted the photos off my social media pages from an evening with Annabelle. As I still love horror, I'm reluctant to post anything horror related on my platforms due to the subconscious or even a conscious fear of the situation repeating itself. I had to dig through my trash and archives to find the photo of me and Annabelle. Tread lightly if you stare at the photo. Whatever you do, don't mock her. Oh, so that's the photo. That was actually a very, very interesting story, if I must say so myself. It seems like a lot happened, and honestly it did sound like a horror movie, but I'm so glad that things sounded like it started to get better. I wonder if there's any more stories.
When I was young, I went to a friend's house which had undoubtedly weird decor. Picture multiple clown paintings and multiple dolls. The worst of all was in my friend's room, a porcelain doll that hung from the roof on a swing. I hated it. Whenever I was sleeping or in the room, I swear I would see it swing, even when the doors were closed. It really creeped me out. We stopped hanging out at her house as we grew older because I hated her house, and so did she. After not visiting her house for, I'd say, at least 4 years, I see the doll swing and I say, God, I hate that doll. I kid you not. The swing broke, the doll dropped to the ground and shattered its legs. I hate dolls. What is probably a coincidence of the rope on the swing wearing down? Probably. Do I still hate that thing? Yes.
How's that an Annabelle Doll experience?
I think that's like clickbait.
It's got to be. Horror fans are familiar with Ed and Lorraine Warren's occult exploits and their archive of cursed objects. The real-life paranormal investigator duo have been the subject of James Wan's film franchise, and movie-goers have seen them, as played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. Action in 2 Conjuring movies, The Nun and Now That Annabelle Comes Home. Just a month after Lorraine Warren died, I visited the New Haven Con by Warner Bros. To learn the true story behind the Warrens, getting a chance to speak to their daughter Judy Spera and her husband, and Ed Warren's longtime protege, Tony Serpra. I visited the archive of cursed objects, and yes, I'm at Annabelle and have so far lived to tell the tale. Our first stop is Union Cemetery in Easton, which isn't all that far from New Haven. The cemetery is full of headstones dating back to the 17th century and a supernatural rap sheet a mile long, making it one of the most haunted places in the United States. Tony Serpra gathers me and the other guests in a circle and gives us the lay of the land. The spirits that haunt Union Cemetery are not from the dead buried there. Some of these are presences called upon by satanic cults and witches' covens. The more simple truth, though, according to Serpra, is that a place, because people will it to be so. You don't have to actively court spirits, you have to believe hard enough that those spirits exist.
The most famous of those spirits is undoubtedly the woman in white, a spectre who often appears on the side of a road, usually Route 59, right by Union Cemetery. She's so famous that she was the first bit of American occult lore to be featured in the long-running CW series Supernatural. Well before that, though, the woman in white had a run-in with the Warrens. According to Spira, a wealthy man was once driving down Route 59 when he suddenly hit a woman wearing white who appeared out of nowhere. He came home to his wife crying because he was so shaken, Spira tells us. Seeking help, the man called Ed Warren, who then went to Union Cemetery with a VHS camcorder and waited for hours upon hours. When he looked back at the footage later, he saw movement flitting among the graves of, you guessed it, a woman in white. Which brings us to our first lesson: how to take a psychic photograph. The first step, as Spira repeats this over and over again throughout our journey, is to envision yourself surrounded by a bright white light. That, according to Spira, is God's protection. Spira is very clear. You'll need his protection if your intention is to seek out spirits in a graveyard. The only other requirement besides belief is a camera or your phone, which will do in a pitch. Spirit instructs us to walk around Union Cemetery, feel out anything that might call to us, and then snap a photo. After waiting 15 seconds, we snap a photo in the same spot. You wouldn't see anything in the moment, but it's possible that your own belief will bring forward an image later. I look back at my photos later, and I don't find anything unexpected or strange in my photos beyond my fellow guests and YouTube influencers. The lack of any supernatural evidence is both a letdown and honestly a relief. Obviously, you can't keep all this paranormal investigating on an empty stomach, so we go to dinner, where we watch the very video of the woman in white Ed Warren shot, and you can absolutely see someone moving through the graves. There's also a video of Maurice Therault, or as you may know him better, Frenchie. The French-Canadian character who appears in The Nun is very loosely based on a real farmer, Therault, who the Warrens believe was possessed by one or more darker spirits, including the Grand Poobah of evil, the devil himself. In the video which Ed Warren took, we can see what appears to be sweat on Therault's tip of his face, and transforms into blood on his shirt as he answers the question, "Who are you?" with "I am who I am." Spera explains that while the Warrens were able to give Therault some relief, he did eventually take his own life. Having eaten, we head to a second graveyard, Stepney Cemetery in Monroe Con. The cemetery where both Ed and Lorraine Warren were laid to rest. It's here where we are given our next lesson in reaching out to spirits by talking with them and recording audio. Tony and Judy tell us that we probably won't find much success contacting spirits tonight because of the size of the group we're in. They also insist the women are more likely to make contact because they are usually more emotionally open. Spirit insists that can be very dangerous for women before he explains how to use your key as a weapon for self-defense. There's always this oddball pragmatism in his stories, and also blue-collar approach to the paranormal. I approach a nearby grave, set my phone to record, and ask a series of questions, waiting about 15 seconds between each, just like when I attempted to take a psychic photo. What's good? I ask, and listen to the recording later. I usually hear a high-pitched sound in between that, and each suggestive question, it sounds almost like a plane, but I don't recall any planes flying overhead at the time, and the sound does stop when I'm asking my questions. Interesting.
Tombstones and spooky sounds are one thing, but they can't hold a candle to Annabelle, the real Annabelle. So after the group had been sufficiently psychologically prepped, we drive to the Warners, where the archive remains in a kind of museum format, and naturally before we enter, a priest says a prayer over all of us, placing oil on our foreheads. One of the PR reps for the film actually had her rosary on hand as we entered. If you've seen the movies that make up the Conjuring verse, then you have seen the fictionalized version of the Warrens archive, where they keep all the cursed objects they come across. In Annabelle Comes Home, you get a large look at it than ever before, but the reality of the archive is very different. For the sake of the movie magic, the fictional Warreners inhabit a world where every object has its menace quotient amped up to 666. In a way, though, it's the more mundane, everyday quality of many of the objects in the real archive that makes it exciting. For example, there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex toy the Sarpra explains was deeply haunted, and even to this day we sometimes move around the archive at will, but it looks just like a toy does. That's sort of the point. After all, the real Annabelle doll is just an oversized Raggedy Ann, not the obvious evil doll from the movies. But the real Annabelle is housed in a very special case. The stain of the wood has holy water in it, and there are 3 crosses represented the Holy Trinity. The Lord's Prayer and Michael's Prayer are both inscribed on the wood. It is dangerous, yes, Sarpra says of Annabelle. It is the most dangerous object in this museum, yes.
Spirit explains that there's more to Annabelle's story than what moviegoers have seen in The Conjuring and Annabelle. He tells of a priest who shouted at Annabelle, claiming that no demonic force is more powerful than the Lord. The priest arrived at the Warrens in a brand new car, one he'd been very proud of, only to have it demolished in a collision with a tractor trailer the same day. Spirit says the priest saw Annabelle in his rearview mirror moments before the accident happened. Next, Spirit tells the tale of a man and his girlfriend who asked to see the doll and mocked it when Ed Warren told them the history of Annabelle. The man supposedly lost control of his motorcycle the same day, killing him and severely injuring his girlfriend. Is Annabelle's curse real? Spirit likens taking risks with the supernatural to a game of Russian roulette. There's maybe only one chamber with a bullet in it. Would you still fire the gun? Or would you choose not to take the risk in playing around with something you don't know and can't quantify? Naturally, we all take pictures with Annabelle. It's about a week later, and as far as I can tell, nothing terrible has befallen me or anybody else who attended this Annabelle Comes Home event. But I'll tell you this, I had nightmares all last night before writing this article.
Wow, okay, so with that one, we was able to experience, we read about someone's experience with the Annabelle doll, but also kind of like an investigation that they put onto it. We have read someone's story basically where they had a terrible experience after meeting the Annabelle doll, but then we've also read someone's story where nothing happened to them afterwards. So it really is like a 50-50 chance by the sounds of it, and it also really depends on what you do during like an investigation or what you do during meeting the Annabelle doll as well. But that was very, very interesting to learn about and read about. But that is it for today's podcast episode. Thank you all so much for watching or listening. Remember to follow us on Spotify and rate us 5 stars. That just helps us get out there a little bit more. But thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and we'll see you in our next one. Bye.